Hi, I'm Courtney Bailey, Chief Development Officer for MPTF. What you're about to hear is one of the panels that took place during our recent women's conference, Deal With It, on July 28, 2019. Madeline Hammond, who produces the conference, took great care to make sure we found the best speakers to cover the most relevant topics of today. This event is for the betterment of women in the entertainment industry, but there is such great information here that can really help everybody. So listen, enjoy, and most importantly, feel free to pass it along to someone who may benefit from this information as well. Today, you have the pleasure of learning what happens when we don't have a will. You're about to listen to a discussion that was recorded live, so there may be areas where the audio drops out a bit or an audience member's question is hard to hear. But don't worry, you'll definitely get the context of what the panel is about. MPTF is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor a statement of MPTF policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by MPTF. The views expressed by our guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by MPTF employees are those of the employees and do not necessarily reflect the view of MPTF or any of its officials. Thank you for listening.
But I want to acknowledge the panel for being here, acknowledge all of you for choosing this particular topic of conversation, which can be quite challenging and intimidating and thought-provoking, emotion-provoking, but obviously so relevant to yourself and your own path and those that you love and care about. I've spoke to these ladies each individually over the past couple of weeks, and something that we all have in common is a very personal story that has kind of thrust us into this path of service. And for myself, it was when I went to bed married at the age of 27 and woke up widowed because my husband had crashed in his helicopter in a training mission. And my profession is as an RN, and it shifted my entire perspective, and I went into hospice care after that and spent the majority of my nursing career in the hospice service, and then also creating a death and dying dinner party that I hosted in LA for about 7.5 years, educating the general public who were really undereducated and not knowing what to do with this information that we're going to be bringing forward today. And Madeline invited me back to share with you, but as I introduce the women that are up here, I'm happy for you to read more about their real detailed sort of resumes in the pamphlet that you have, but I would be encouraging the panelists, as you introduce yourself, to maybe share a personal professional story that did kind of get you propelled here and of service in this particular way. But also to tell everyone what you're really passionate about, because we have a very unique perspective of a spiritual perspective with our chaplain here. We have MD, so we have a medical professional here, and then we have legal with Rebecca. So it's very interesting that we have all these three components, and we're going to try to glean as much wisdom from the panelists as we possibly can. We'll have time for questions at the end. But let's start with Dr. Ann, introducing yourself and what's got you so passionate about this topic.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Ann, and let's see. So back in 1998, so I had just turned in my medical school applications. I was just about to finish my senior year of college, and my mom had a horseback riding accident and had severe brain injury, and so which put us onto a very long path of dealing with the medical system and kind of figuring out how things, her story ended up, not the happiest ending, but our family really explored what is quality of life for my mom, for us. She ended up living for 16 years with disabilities. My dad took care of her every single day. I spent time with her every single day. But that experience as a family member right before entering into medical school really helped me kind of see things from a patient perspective and family perspective at the same time that I was learning to be a doctor. And I found that something that we could do a lot better from the healthcare system's perspective is communication. And really, that's been sort of my passion throughout my career. And so, and I think I didn't even necessarily realize that that was such a driver until I started reflecting more recently. But now my career is really focused on, I'm a palliative care physician, so I work with patients who are seriously ill and help try to improve communication. I'm also very passionate about advanced care planning because from my own personal experience, and I've had some since then, you never know what's gonna happen, and so it's really important to communicate and really have that good understanding of people who are close to you so that you can advocate for them in the right way. And so that's why I'm here, and I'm excited to be here to talk with everybody.
Thank you. And Chaplain Dina.
Hi, so I'm Chaplain Dina Kuperstock. I am one of the chaplains for the Motion Picture Television Fund, and I work primarily on the campus in Woodland Hills with our 230 residents and staff and people who are family members, friends, part of the community of those who live there. And before that, I was an agent at CAA. So that's a story for another day. This is a true story. But my passion specifically about advanced planning comes very personally back to when I was in the 4th grade, actually. The stories of how each of my grandmothers had the end of their lives unfold and the lessons and wisdom that it shared with me has shaped me as a human being and very much as a chaplain. And one of my grandmothers lived in Pennsylvania and had spoken to my father her wishes for treatment. She was a Holocaust survivor. She had just seen her husband die the year before. She was very aware of mortality and options and was very clear that she did not want certain forms of treatment, but she only spoke them verbally to my father. His sister did not witness that verbal expression. She didn't have them written, and she fell into a coma. My father and his sister ended up in a court case that lasted almost a year, both about her medical treatment and about the estate, which had not been revamped after their father had died. And as a result, my father and his sister are estranged, and I do not have an aunt. And it has torn my family apart. So there was a high awareness of the importance of this. And as a gift to me and my sister every year since, my father and my mother have updated their own advanced care planning and will and sent us an email about where every single document is in the house where we might need it in the future. And it is one of the most generous and loving things that they do, because though my father understands from an emotional place what it means, my mom hates talking about this stuff. It's a very courageous act. So that's one. And then my other grandmother had seen her husband recently die and was diagnosed with breast cancer while she was acting as his caretaker. And she elected not to get treatment so that she could be healthy while caring for him. And she was able to make her own decisions about what she wanted for care, who she wanted around, all of the decisions down to what music she wanted to listen to while she was dying and who was going to be surrounding her. And so she was able to create a beautiful end of life. And as much as I had the same amount of grief to see her go, I have beautiful memories of the end of her life. And so I know the difference of having an advanced care plan and a will and not having it. And I want nobody's family to suffer in the way my family suffered, and to have the spiritual, emotional, relational opportunities that we had when my other grandmother chose to navigate this path.
Thank you. And Rebecca.
We all have such personal, can you hear me okay? Okay. We all have such personal stories that brought us here, and they stem from when we were young people. So that is, I have a 4.5-year-old daughter, so it is such an eye-opening thing to really look at and realize that so much of what we're doing with these young and little people impacts them for life. So thank you for sharing your stories. When I was 12, I was the only grandchild in the family, the only child, obviously, and so I grew up with a bunch of old people around me. So when I was 12, my grandparents on my mom's side said, "Here's our estate plan." And I was like, well, what the fuck is an estate plan? Okay, it's a bunch of papers stapled together, with that blue backing of that old time way of practicing. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't really care about it. I was 12, I was probably like, why do I have to be at grandma and grandpa's again? Can't I go play with my friends? And fast forward to about when I was 15, we talked about it again, and they said, So they had 2 kids, my mom, and they had a son, my mom's brother, and they were completely estranged. I had only seen him like once in my life. Long story short, he's sort of crazy, and so I understand the whole reason, but they had created this plan where he was going to own part of the real estate. And even at 15, I was like, why would you do that to us when we don't have any relationship, right? So they listened. Why did they listen to a 15-year-old kid telling them what to do? But they did, and they went back to their lawyer and they changed it. And I was like, give him money, but don't give him a part where we have to manage things together, right? So fast forward to about 10 or 11 years ago, I had my close friend at the time, and we were like, we're gonna start a firm together. And we both thought the other was sort of on crack at the time, but we agreed to go forward. We had dinner, we printed out all of the areas of law that you could practice, and we just started talking about them. And we decided, what do we wanna do? We can do anything. So we wanted to make a real difference in families. We wanted to have lifelong relationships, and we wanted to avoid court if we could. Now, if you think about the areas of law that you're familiar with, very few of them fit into that criteria. So we're like, okay, I guess it's wills and trusts. And I said, I didn't even take that in law school. I wasn't gonna do that. So we spent a year learning every single thing. We went to conferences all around the country. We read all these books. And so now, 10 years into our practice, I'm very grateful for that, because I know that when people come in the door, they don't know anything about this. And so we teach them from the ground up. We don't talk to them or at them. We work collaboratively and we guide them, because people need guidance with this. And we just happen to be experts in this, but our clients are all experts in other things. And so we learn from each other, and together we create really good plans.
Thank you. Thank each of you. I'm curious to take the temperature of those who have chosen to attend this part of the day. Who has a will in place? And who has their advanced care plans in place? Wonderful. Thanks for being here. So a few of you don't, which is great, planting seeds today for you to take action. But maybe, Rebecca, you can let them know what happens when you don't have those in place. And maybe also an encouragement, those of you who raise your hands that have it, how to negotiate those people that you love, that you want to have them do it too, maybe a 2-parter. And then the rest of you two can fill in.
So when you all raised your hand of those who have it, how many have updated it in the last few years? Okay, good. How many of you love giving gifts? How many of you want to be a burden? So not to do this in a shameful way, but for those of you who did not raise your hands, I will not ask you to raise them, but this is what you've chosen, to be that burden on your family. The people who have given that gift have thought through this. So those people who choose not to do it, it's usually because they just haven't gotten around to it. It's because nothing has come to them to say, whether it's a health crisis or a close friend that's gone through something, or a family member. And so they just haven't gotten to it. We have so many people who are like, this has been on my to-do list since my kids were born. And I say, how old are your kids? 37 and 42. And I get it. And some of these people are in their 80s and they're like, Mom, it's really time to do this, And so it's just any time is better than waiting too long. So basically what I will say is that the Advanced Healthcare Directive is about medical decisions. The power of attorney is about every other decision, legal and finance, that you can think of. If you do not have those 2 documents, and one of them is in front of you, the 5 wishes is the Advanced Healthcare Directive, and you become incapacitated, and if we live long enough, the statistics are terrible, that if we're over 80, about 50% of us will lose mental capacity. Once you lose mental capacity, you cannot create these documents, period. That is the burden on your family, because that means you are headed to conservatorship. Conservatorship is the court process that is so painfully expensive. It is such a waste of money. I can't tell you how many times I say to people, stop wasting your money on lawyers, because it's painful for me when I see the bills and I'm like, can't we discount? And it's just painful to me. If you do not have a trust, and I just want to reframe everybody's thinking, don't talk about a will. A will leads you to probate. The only thing that prevents you from going to probate is a trust. And if you have children who are minors, anybody have minor children besides me? The will name your guardian. But other than that, it's this safety net vehicle. And so I hear it on the radio all the time. NPR is like, oh, and put us in your will. And I'm like, stop saying will, because that is going to lead to court, and we want to avoid court. So I will say that 95% of the estate plans we see that come from other lawyers are defective in some way. The client doesn't know it, but the successful estate plan will honor your wishes, which means we have to dive deep and figure out what they are, and sometimes these are painful discussions. We have a lot of tissue boxes at the office. And they're really well drafted. We see a lot of really crappy drafted trusts. The other part is we avoid court. So the biggest thing is, for those who raised your hand, if you have a trust, you have to make sure it's funded. That means we retitle the asset from your name to the trust name. And the third one is to maintain family harmony. Now, I will say very briefly, last night we went to dinner. Several of the speakers went to dinner, and I didn't know who Dr. Rachel was. I don't know if you all know who she is, but hers was a little X-rated last night. Mine's just R-rated, because I swear like a sailor, and I talk about really shitty stuff, right? So I'm just going to rattle off, and I did this last night. I'm just going to rattle off some prices of the bills for clients so that you can see how bad this is, because that's the burden part.
Don't
right?
worry, after she scares you, I'll make it softer.
We have a plan.
Madeline said, scare the shit out of them. So here I am.
She told us to terrify, but I don't listen. So
We've had, that's good. We've had several quadriplegics due to accidents. Hold the fucking rail when you go down the stairs is all I can tell you. Because 3 of them fell downstairs. All of them have died as a result. We had a young couple in their 20s. Who thinks about estate planning when you're in your 20s? Nobody, right? Except the kids of our clients. One of them fell off a roof. They happened to be a same-sex couple. The one who fell off the roof's family would not acknowledge that he was gay, took the body, never let Shane see it. This is the documentary Bridegroom. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. One of them, the husband died young. They had a young child. She was pregnant. They did not have enough life insurance. One of them, and I'll get to the money in a second. One of them was had a messed up plan because the powers in the advance directive and power of attorney should be immediate versus springing. Springing means we have to go to a doctor to deem you incapacitated. Immediate means we get to bypass doctors. Not like what? How many percentage of doctors are palliative care doctors and get this?
Well, assessing decision-making capacity, hopefully most doctors.
No, but who get it. That's different than can assess it. Doctors don't want to do this for us.
Well, I would say that some of the medical part is the advance directive and the medical decisions piece. And, I know, at least at UCLA, we've been doing a lot of work to improve, like we have a new advance directive and we've been doing a lot of training for all the primary care providers. So I think at UCLA, I can say that there's good basic knowledge of the medical part for advanced care planning. There's a lot of other pieces to estate planning too that we don't touch as.
I just mean
Yeah.
to determine whether someone has capacity or not. So
Yeah.
palliative care doctors, what I mean by get it is they get how important it is and to do it right. The majority of doctors out there don't get it, and so we can't get them to get deemed incapacitated, so these people can't help their mother who's being abused because there's no legal power. We can't get there. So very quickly, a conservatorship, we're at 27,000 right now. We're not done. That's if you don't have the advance directive and power of attorney. This is because the advance directive and power of attorney didn't have a successor. They just had the wife. So when she died of a heart attack and he had Alzheimer's already, we can't do anything but conservatorship. One of them is because the parents refused to plan properly. We're at 19,000. One of them, the CPA, was the woman who died, and all the kids thought all of her affairs were in order. The trust administration is now at 48,000 because it wasn't done. One of them where dad's wife died, and this is a common scenario. Guess how fast until he remarried? A year. We're at 15,000. One of them, 6 kids. One of them decided to get a parent to change all of the real estate over to him. We're at 30,000. One of them, dad did not plan for his estate plan and he died unexpectedly and had a minor child, so we're in a guardianship, 15,000. Another one who didn't plan, 19,000. A probate, unfortunately, this woman was found after 2 weeks being dead in her house with her dog.
I'm definitely hearing the expense of not planning, but I want to. Maybe we should wrap
two
this
more, I will
to
say.
and bring it to Dina and her follow-up.
Another second wife scenario, 60,000, and selecting the wrong trustee who didn't know how to do it, 55,000. Get your shit done.
I think for me, my concern is the spiritual and emotional cost. So I want to talk about that. And also the spiritual and emotional potential. She mentioned that for a lot of people, they just put it off. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, let's do our advanced care planning today. And so I'm specifically going to talk about the advanced care plan a little bit less than the estate, which I don't have the same expertise in. But with advanced care planning, the first step is acknowledging the fact that you're physically mortal. And we can do all of the meditation and manifesting we want. We cannot manifest our physical body into immortality. We just haven't figured that out yet. And okay, if you're from a religious tradition where you believe that, let's talk afterwards. I'm sorry if I insulted you, but mostly we don't have evidence of that. What we can do is what Miss Val said, which is recognize, oh, I'm mortal, I have an expiration date. We all do. Everyone I love, everyone I'm courageously allowing myself to be in relationship with has an expiration date. At this moment, I can decide to live in fear, or I can decide to make the rest of my life present and beautiful. And the way that you can do that actively is to say, here are the things that are important to me for quality of life, now and in the future. And now here are things I am able to do and want to do. But I may not be able to do all those things in the future, or I might be able to. There is plenty about when we get sick, when we lose capacity, and when we die that is up to God, the universe, cosmic forces, luck. And it could be any of us on our way home today in the car, and it could be when we're 109, like one of our residents who is just turned 109 this week. So maybe it's going to be when she's 110, I don't know. But what we can do is say, if it's going to be soon or if it's going to be later, here are some of the factors within my control, not with God, not with the cosmic powers. This is the music I want playing. I do or do not want someone from my tradition to pray on my behalf. Here's the way I want it to smell. Here are my favorite flowers that I want in the room, let alone the medical decisions of, I believe that life is God-given, and at all cost, at any machine, any treatment, it should be preserved. Or, I believe life is a gift from God, but that for somebody to be in extreme suffering, that is no longer honoring the life has been given. and so I don't want a feeding tube. It doesn't mean one or the other is aligned with a religious or a spiritual outlook. It's about knowing the individual person and how their belief system influences the choice they make, and personalizing their medical care as a care of their soul as much as it is a care of the body. And so when you're thinking about what you want, it's not just about checking off the boxes on the form. The reason we picked this 5 wishes as opposed to some of the other forms, it talks about some of these more personal and emotional things than some of the other forms, is to think about, who do I trust to tell those things to about what my beliefs are? And if I'm gonna pick somebody, if I can't make decisions for myself and I'm gonna pick somebody to speak on my behalf, I want someone who's gonna be like a godparent, but for me. If something should happen to me, a godparent is who makes the best decisions for my children reflective of my beliefs and values. If you designate a godparent for yourself, you gotta tell them what your values are and what your beliefs are around what is sustainable and meaningful life. And so that's my focus in advanced care planning, and because that's my focus, I don't start with the form. When I work with a person or with families starting to do their advanced care planning, I start with a prayer, or I start with 3 deep breaths, or I start with what's on your bucket list. What does it mean to your soul to be alive? And then let's rewind to the decisions that might reflect that. And so there are all the scary costs, and there's a beautiful amount of potential in connecting to who you are, manifesting your most authentic self, finding your sense of purpose and meaning, and connecting to people in your life by sharing these things. So there's a lot of positive stuff, but we talk about this as something scary. It can be something that you make an annual tradition, or we start doing as part of the getting married process, or once you've had a child, to think about these things. And I just really want to encourage you to invite your family and the people in your life in as an opportunity and not as a burden. I get to do this, right? I'm not dying suddenly and nobody knows what I want. I get to do this, as opposed to I have to do this because it's an obligation.
Thank you. And Anne, maybe you could speak to palliative care, hospice, and then we talked about something really interesting on the phone, the values. You know, I don't want to live if, this kind of thing that we were discussing.
Exactly. So I can highlight, I think the 2 things that I want to echo what you said. I think 2 of the most important things are communication, like one of the most important things, communication, communication, communication. And what you want to communicate is more about values, goals, and priorities. That's the most important thing. I would even say that having those conversations with your family and with your healthcare providers is probably even more important than the documents, but the documents are also important, especially depending on specific things. So for example, I'll talk through just a couple clear steps for advanced care planning. One of the main things that you do when you fill out an advanced directive is that you put the who is your healthcare decision maker, who would be your durable power of DPOA for healthcare, your durable power of attorney for healthcare. And that person, with most advanced directives, that person only makes decisions on your behalf when you are no longer able to make your own decisions. And so that's especially important. So for example, for me, the default for me, if something were to happen, if I didn't have an advanced directive, would be my husband. Let's say I wanted my sister to be my decision maker. That would be really important for that to be in a formal document, because if there was no document, he would be my next of kin person. So the other important thing is that it's not just a one-time thing that you sit down and fill out a document. It's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing discussion. We all will change our minds about things. After the birth of my daughter, I think I felt a lot different about decisions I might make than like 5 years before then, and what's important to me and what are my values and priorities. And we actually just we have a brand new UCLA Health directive that really focuses on values and goals and priorities rather than specific treatments and hypothetical scenarios.
There's a link to the UCLA directive also on the insert and that we've done in the handout. So if you want to look at that one as well. Yeah.
And so some of the things. So so I want to bring in that quality of life thing that you were talking about when we talk about this, because as a palliative care physician, one of the things that I do is help people through some of these tough situations and making decisions. And one of the things that I know from this work is that no one's the same. Everybody has their own definition of what is quality of life for me. And the only way you can get to know what somebody's version of quality of life is to talk about. So you get back to this communication. So, for example, one person, some people, and this is another personal story, but I remember, 5 years into my mom's situation, somebody came up to my dad and said, "Oh, you need to fill out this document because your wife has a poor quality of life." And he was so upset because we felt she had a very good quality of life. She had told us what was important to her, and we were, again, these are one of the things I teach my trainees is that never make any judgments, that quality of life is a very personal, subjective thing. And so some people would never want to live in a nursing home no matter what. Other people would, want to live on machines if they were able to interact with their family. So these types of things are very personal, and so just talking about it is really important. The other thing that I would say is that there's some really great tools, advanced care planning tools that are available. One of my close colleagues that I work with developed a website called Prepare for Your Care, and
The link is also in there.
It's you can just walk through the different steps. It's great. So if it's something that you're interested in. And then the actual advanced directive, one thing that I would say is that there was a study that we did like 15 years ago, and we surveyed people in the community, and they would say they had advanced directives, but then they weren't in the medical record. So one of the things is to make sure that if you have an advanced directive, that your doctor has it. So I would say thinking about it yourself, starting the conversation with the people that you love, the people that you want to speak for you when you're unable to speak for yourself. And then make sure that your doctor understands your goals and values and has those documents and information, I think are really important for if something happens or, and I think it's the idea that it's an ongoing process really makes everybody more comfortable having to deal with these things as life progresses. And some times that you might want to consider readdressing. I saw this and I thought it was really helpful. If you get to a new decade in age, if you have the death of a loved one, you might be thinking about things differently. If you go through a divorce, that's one that I see a lot where the person on the advanced directive is the ex-husband, and that might not be who you want. Diagnosis of a significant health decision, so that might change the way you think about things. Decline in functional status, maybe you thought before, oh, I would never want to live in this way, but then something happens, you're like, actually, I'm doing pretty good. Maybe I want to change what I put. Or if you change your housing situation changes, so that's another, you go from living independently to not living independently, or someone else moves in and you need extra support or something like that. So those are some just ideas of times that you might want to reconsider.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered. I tried to look at the palliative care part in there.
Yeah, that's great. We'll just move back down the table, Chaplain Dina. Maybe you shared with me this analogy on the phone about sort of TV show in relationship to.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You may have, there are lots of different names for sort of the part of being a chaplain that I do that relates to end of life. Maybe you've heard someone called an end of life doula. And I really want to use both the doula analogy and the narrative analogy. So start with the narrative because, right, entertainment people. And I used to work in film. I used to find distribution for independent movies. And a lot of what we talked about was what's the feeling that you want when you walk out of a theater when it's the last episode of a show, right? It doesn't totally take away value that was in all the other parts of the story that came before it, but how the last scene goes can really influence how everyone perceives the whole. And so the idea is that you are essentially directing your own last scene. You can't edit it, but you can direct it, you can score it, you can choreograph it, you can put all of these factors and create something really beautiful. What is the scene that your story deserves is the way of thinking about it. And the reason I like the doula analogy also is most people are used to the term doula relating to the beginning of life and a life coming into the world. And so a doula will meet with a woman or with a couple about what's your birth plan. it's not necessarily going to go that way. There are a lot of unknown factors, but what are your preferences? What's important to you? Do you want to be in a hospital? Do you want to be at home? This is a moment of transition in terms of your relationship to the world and your relationship to yourself and your body. Let's talk about those things. Let's figure out some breathing exercises for this. So the doula is there for the baby, and the doula is also there for the family. At the end of life, you also have the same situation. You need some breathing exercises. You're there for the person who's dying, but you're also there for the family. And you're talking about how you can make this a smooth transition and relate to the world in a different capacity and relate to bodies in a different way. And so really working at the Motion Picture Television Fund and being with people who understand story and have beautified it in various ways. I've had someone before who told me how she wanted her hair done. She was a hairdresser. She was 98 years old. She had done Princess Grace's hair for her wedding, and she had a very clear vision of what she wanted her hair to look like if people were coming to see her at the end of her life. You know, and there are elements of creativity that are so vital to quality of life and sense of identity for people who have been creative all their lives, that this is a play space, in a space that we usually look as very dark and out of our control. And so I just invite you to think about, like, what do I want my story? How do I want my story to end ideally? You know, a lot of people say, oh, I just want to die in my sleep. Well, sometimes that's the best, and some people want to be holding the hand of somebody that they really want to be with. And before I let this go, there's just one resource. I didn't put it on the sheet, but that I think everyone should have the opportunity to read. It's a book by Dr. Ira Byock's palliative care doctor. It's called The 4 Things That Matter Most. And I'm not giving away the entire book. He does this in the beginning, that most of the people he's worked with that are looking at terminal diagnosis, end of their life, have 4 things they really want to say to their families and loved ones, and vice versa. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you, and I love you. And pretty much everything that people want to say boils down to that. One of the things that we've adopted in my home, because I revere this philosophy of Dr. Byock's, we do it every night before bed, because you never know when you might not wake up. So why not, when you can, say the things to the people you love? Doing this exercise, realizing if you had little time left, what you might want to get done and put in that last scene, tells you what should happen in the second act. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Rebecca, maybe you can tell us what is the definition of a successful plan, so people would know they had their things in order.
We have 10 minutes left.
Great.
Before I say that, I just want to clarify one thing, that your spouse does not automatically have any of these powers. So you have to write these documents up. You have to get them notarized if necessary. The advance directive does not have to be notarized. The power of attorney does. But no one automatically has this power. So I think I mentioned it earlier. My definition is that you have really thoughtfully described what all of your wishes are, and most of it for me is the advance directive, but then the second part is clearly in your trust. A lot of families think that they've always been close, so they're going to maintain that. And you know, we have 2 clients right now, best of friends, the 2 kids, and now mom and dad are gone and they're mortal enemies. And so they never would have thought this. And so I think it's really having the parents, if they had thought this out, first of all, they would not have been co-trustees, these kids. But making sure your documents are really well drafted and thought out. Now, you won't know what well drafted means, so that part I know is hard. Making sure you fund your trust. I cannot tell you enough that people miss this step, and so we end up in court afterwards. And the family harmony part is deciding on the right people in these positions, but not everything is equal. How many people have more than 1 kid? So if things are not equal, and they don't have to be, you have to write a letter of intent. It has to be in your handwriting, can't be typed. This is your heart. Our documents don't have any heart. They're all legalese. So describe why you are making these decisions, whether it's who has control, whether it's somebody gets the trust outright, somebody has it held in trust, you know, the benefits held in trust or not, whether the distribution is different. And so it's so important to carefully consider this and review it, not every year, but say every 5 years.
We have some time for questions. And then our panelists will insert their call to action
Before we jump into the questions, just one quick thing that we all hadn't mentioned, and I really want to emphasize because she spoke about giving it to your doctor, is that it has to be signed, not just by you, but by witnesses or a notary, and that's extremely important. So that, and it can't be anyone who's going to benefit financially from your trust or from your estate. And so, if you are in the guilds, if you are members of the industry and you are looking for help getting signatures of other people, it could just be a neighbor, it could be anybody, but we're a resource for everybody in going through this process and getting it signed, making sure that you have copies and your doctors have it is great, but it's not actually legally binding unless you get it, those other signatures on it.
Thank you.
Very true.
Go ahead.
What do you mean by funded? I have a trust, but I don't know what funded is.
So are the assets, when they come in the mail and you see them on the envelope, does the envelope say your name or your trust's name?
Trust.
Then it's funded.
Okay.
But just make sure all of your assets are like that. Up to, you're allowed to keep $150,000 outside of the trust. Anything more than that, we end up in court. So for your assets, just make sure it's
So
as
asset
complete.
funded, not just the
Yeah, so your bank accounts, your life insurance beneficiaries, your
mortgage bills.
not your mortgage, but your deed to your property. All of that needs to be in the trust.
All right, the lady in the back with the, yes, that's you.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you all. I mean, it's an amazing service what you're doing. I work in the insurance business, and I was hoping, Rebecca, that I work for New York Life, that you would explain how important it is, one, to have insurance to cover whether it's mortgage or your children's college or whatever the case may be, and why it's important that it should be in the trust, because that's probably going to be the biggest lump sum of money that is going to be inherited, is going to be the
Right.
insurance.
So I talk about with every single client life insurance and long-term care insurance because they're both important. And the reason that it's so important to have it in your trust is because if your trust is the governing body of your estate when you pass away. And if you have a beneficiary that's outside of the trust, your trustee has no jurisdiction over it. Now, I just got a call 2 weeks ago from a man who said, I've been with my partner for 19 years, and his sister is the beneficiary on his assets, and he's in the hospital. And I was like, okay, well, here's what we do. We talked Friday, he died Sunday, none of it was done. The fucking sister is getting the estate. Because it doesn't matter that they got married after 19 years and in the hospital. It matters what that Benny designation is. And if you think since 9/11, all of these financial institutions that have merged have kept your beneficiary designations clear, you're mistaken. And if you think your family members know where the hell those are from 10, 20, 30 years ago, you're also mistaken. It is so important that the funding be done right. Thank you.
You had a question.
Okay, my question is this. Can you have a trust that only includes your real estate as opposed to the things like your bank account and other things that may already have a beneficiary designated? Does it all have to be included in the trust, or can you just include real estate?
So when I draw on the board, I always say, like, here's the circle of your trust, right? And here's your assets. I'm a really bad artist, but like your house and, you know, all the different things. And then here's bank accounts, and I draw little circles, and life insurance, and annuities, and all these other things. These beneficiary designations trump. The problem is that when we're administering a trust, we need money. We have to pay debts. We have to pay your final taxes. We have to pay the CPA, we have to pay the attorney. And if the money is already gone, the beneficiary designation, all you need is the death certificate, and if it's a bank account, you need to wait 40 days. If that money is gone, the only way that we can administer your estate is to sell that property. If that's not the goal, you have to have those assets in the trust.
Thank you, thank you. We have just maybe 2 minutes left. I really want to encourage the panel in like 30 seconds or less just to give a call to action, something concrete for our crew that came today with such great attention.
I can't just say, go get your shit done, huh? You can look, so here you have the 5 wishes. There's one thing that it says in the, and I didn't look because I didn't bring my glasses, but so I can't really see it very well. But somewhere in here it says that this also kind of counts for your financial institutions. It does not. I have called the makers of 5 wishes. I know they haven't changed it. You can go online. You can go to Google University and type in California Statutory Durable Power of Attorney. Make sure it's from a government website. Print it out. Fill it in. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it's better than nothing. And just be sure that you get it notarized. Like Dina said, you have to sign it. So just go do it. You can fill this out today, and you can do that tonight, and at least you're going to avoid conservatorship.
Thank you, Rebecca.
My suggestion would be actually not something spiritual. I recommend a ritual. I recommend really intimate and meaningful conversations with the people in your life. But my call to action is to calendar that time. You're all busy people. I love that you made time for this, but if you're succeeding enough in the industry to be invited here, then you're somebody who's got a lot on your plate. This isn't gonna happen unless you put it in your calendar. So look at a month out, or look at between Thanksgiving and Christmas when family's on your mind, whatever it is that fits in the rhythm of your life. But it's not gonna happen if you keep saying, I'll get there at some point. I really feel that you have to do this for yourself. It is a gift to yourself that your voice will be heard, that your wishes will be followed. No one can mind read them from you, and so do it before you leave today.
Thanks,
Put a
Chaplain
reminder.
Dina. Thank you so much, Anne.
And I would just say to just start a conversation, and I think the resource list that the group put together is really great. So, and some might speak to you more than others. So I think looking at those and finding some tools that work for you to just get started.
And thank you for being here. I know there were a couple more questions. Our panelists will be here for just a few moments. If those of you who have questions want to come up and get them answered, thank you. Be well and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
So now that you're inspired by this incredible panel of women, let's continue this feeling. Please visit our website at MPTF.com. Follow us on all our social media feeds, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or if you're so inclined, we'd be so grateful for your support. You can text MPTF to 41444 to make a donation.